What's good, y'all? It's your man J Rock, and I'm coming at you with another episode of the J Rock Show. And today I am joined by my brother Siege. How are we doing today?
Oh man, we're doing great. It's a beautiful day today. Just excited to be alive and be here in SimWorld, and I'm excited to be back on the J Rock show. It feels like it's been a minute, man. So it's good to be here. And what are we discussing today?
So, starting off the show today, we've got some big breaking news in recruiting.
Oh yeah,
Run, Run DMV leading scorer and guard Keith Singleton has committed to Georgetown, where he will join fellow Founders Region commit JoJo Kearney. Siege, what do you think of this move?
I love it for Georgetown. I'm interested in it for Keith. Georgetown does have a pretty extensive history of producing some pretty great big men, as we know. So I did love the choice for JoJo. For Keith, I think it's interesting. I think he went a route that maybe not a lot would as a guard that kind of has his skill set. He has been scoring well, but he's also a very underrated defender. He's a decent facilitator, not the best you're gonna find, but he can work on that. But I do kind of like this for Keith. I like the idea he's gonna go to a place he's gonna get some exposure. But what I will say is I love it for Georgetown. They are setting up to have a great defensive squad. If JoJo Kearney and Keith Singleton both find themselves with big roles in their rotation. Those are two very good defenders.
Yes, without question on that. Hopefully Georgetown trying to, they're still trying to get back to that success they had, in the 80s, 90s, and early mid 2000s, especially what they had under Big John Thompson. And now let's not forget, Georgetown is still in the mix for guys such as Kola Abdul Rauf, Kasim Porter Jr., and Jay Laster. They already have a nice foundation to this recruiting class, but they're definitely making moves to try and get back to their past success.
That they are. And look, it's a rich basketball history. So I'm here for it. I'm here for maybe a little revival of Georgetown. See if they can bring back, make it to the tournament, do some things there. They got a rich history, so I'm never too surprised to see them bring in some good recruits, some solid recruits. They might not get the big names that the Dukes and the North Carolinas and the Kentuckys gets, but they also don't tend to get quite as many one and dones as those schools do, which gives them the opportunity to build a program and a team.
And that is another thing a lot of people don't think of is that George, that is very true for Georgetown. And, of course, talking defense, we got to shout out Yells. We know how he loves his defensive minded squads.
That he does, and I'm with him on that. Two of my favorite players, J Rock, PJ Tucker and Rajon Rondo. What do they both do really well? Defense. It's fun to watch a good defender get gritty, get on the floor, do what they need to do.
That's why I still say Dennis Rodman is one of my favorite players of all time. But kind of moving off the talk about defense and Keith Singleton. First of all, congratulations to him. But now I wanted to switch over and talk a little bit about Andrei Ivanov. Because to me, he is one of the more interesting SimWorld U prospects, even at the age of 16. What to you stands out about him, Siege?
I mean, look, 7'2". That stands out immediately, both visually and when you hear it and when you see it on the court. He does a lot of things well on the court. He's not one of those 7'2" guys that you see out there, and it's kind of like he's just tall. This kid's got great footwork at only 16 years old. Shoots a great percentage from the field, as you would expect. I would say, I know you asked what I like about the kid. I would like to see him work a little bit on his rebounding technique. Now, I know his numbers are a little skewed because he plays with Zoe Dorn, who's just kind of a hustle rebounder. He goes and gets those boards. I would like to see Ivanov put himself in better positions to board. By the time he makes it to SimWorld U, and by the time, he's an SWBA prospect, he's going to be going against bigger guys who are going to be, near his size more often, and he's going to have to use that position. But what I do love about the kid is his technical skills in the post. It's phenomenal to see a kid that size have that kind of foot speed, that kind of footwork. It's really impressive, and he's only going to get better.
And that, yeah, without a doubt, his ability to stretch the floor and protect the paint is on another level. And before we switch to the kind of final topic, Um, what do you think, or if you could give a player comparison for Andrei Ivanov, who would you kind of be thinking?
You know, that it's tough. I got a couple people in mind. The issue is, I think saying it out loud is tough because Ivanov's he's more of an old school big. So these names I'm going to say might not have the impact in the NBA that they would have back then. But he reminds me. He's got, like I said, he's got that post game. I kind of want to compare him to a SimWorld U guy and not an SWBA guy. Because right now that's the easier thing for me to see. He's so young, his game can still progress so much. But when I think of him, I'm thinking of guys like back when Gonzaga had Karnowski.
That the Polish madman.
Yes, I want to compare his post footwork to a guy like Al Horford. You know, Al Horford was big. He had
Okay,
great
okay.
footwork. And he's one of those underrated guys. Al Horford is not. You don't hear the name, or not Al Horford. Sorry, I was talking about Big Al Jefferson. Al Jefferson, not Al
Al
Horford.
Jefferson.
Yes, not Al Horford. Al Horford does a little more versatile stuff. Al Jefferson. Is who I'm thinking of. Is that, am I even saying his name right? I believe so. It's been so long since I've talked about the guy. I really liked his game. He was underrated, but you look at the guy and he was a pretty consistent scorer when he was in his prime. About 16 points on his career. Not a great shooter, but neither is Ivanov. Averaged around 8.5 rebounds for his career. And in his prime days, he was a walking bucket down on the post. He actually kind of got phased out in his career as the league was moving towards, what it is today. Traditional bigs not being as prominent as they were. But I'm telling you, bro, in his prime, he was a consistent 18 to 22 points per game scorer. Those seasons that he was kind of in his prime with Utah and with, he had one season with Charlotte. Here's who he reminds me of in terms of his post game. I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's underrated because we don't value those things as highly anymore, but it makes for a really, really good player.
Yeah, without question. And the thing, it's weird. It would be hard for me to kind of compare too, because he hasn't shot from, because he's 7'2", and just because of the way SimWorld Europe has kind of structured their offense, he hasn't really shot the ball from deep a lot. But the ability to stretch the floor and the tools for that is there. Which, when you combine that with his post game, his size, it almost makes him hard at all to compare him as one whole player for me. So he's one of them that you almost have to break it down and compare him in each aspect of his game, and not as a overall player. At least how I look at it. But I love the Al Jefferson comparison. People sleep on him and the impact he had, in the SWBA, but the man could flat out, he could play some basketball.
He was a low post threat night in and night out.
Without a doubt. And I want to wrap the show up today by talking about the defending champs, Beast of the East, and specifically Cassine Porter Jr. Now, maybe a little bit of a quiet season from what people expected coming in, but he's still, in my eyes, one of the best true point guards in SimWorld Prep. But a lot of his interest and offers seem to be mostly from mid-major schools. However, he does hold an offer from Kentucky. The other main interested schools are Virginia Tech and Georgetown. Now, me personally, I believe he can play at a bigger and more notable school. Sure, the numbers may not be sexy, but when I look at his ability to affect a game and a stat sheet in just about every way in category, that to me makes me believe that he could play at a high level in SimWorld U. Now, when you look at that, does it surprise you the way his offers and interests are kind of shaping out currently? And do you think he could be a Power 5 type of player?
Well, first, I'll start off by saying I actually hadn't heard that he had received the offer from Kentucky. I know they're interested; they had expressed interest. I didn't know that they had shout out offers. If that's true, though, that's great for the kid. Because I'll tell you personally, I've talked to KPJ. I've had a few conversations with him, just about things here and there. But I've talked about his college interest with him. I've heard him talk about it, and he would. I know that Kentucky's like kind of one of his dream schools. He would love to play there. And here's the thing: I've spoken highly of KPJ before, and I will continue to do so as a fan of the true point guard. And I think it's interesting, and this is where when you talk about basketball and you talk about how fit is so important in the sport of basketball, almost more than any other sport. I actually, no, not almost, more than any other sport, fit and chemistry are important in basketball. And that's not to say that there's not chemistry with this team, but when you talk about Beast of the East, what do you talk about most? You talk about that rotation that they run, the interesting
Absolutely.
rotations and the very even rotations. Coach Drayton likes to mix it up. Coach Drayton likes to do a little bit of this, do a little bit of that, throw different stuff at you. So I think once KPJ is able to get to a place, and this is not Coach Drayton's fault at all. KPJ, I know, loves playing for Coach Drayton, loves being a part of the BC's culture. But I think when you talk about those numbers aren't so sexy, that's where that comes from. And I think once he's able to find himself where he can really take over as the general for a team. Not necessarily their number one option. I don't see him as a number one option, and that's not a slight on his game. That's not his game. But once he's able to take over as a floor general for a team that has a lot of talent around him, this team has a lot of talent around it, but he's not able to be the sole general of that team when he's on the floor. They move the ball a lot. There's a lot of parity with the way they play their players, with the way Coach Drayton uses them. So I do think he can be a Power 5 player. I think it'll be a challenge for the kid. It's a challenge for any kid that goes to play for Kentucky because you got to compete with a lot of talent. You got to play for a tough coach. It's tough. It'd be a challenge, but I do think he has the chops to play for a school like that and make an impact on a team like that.
Yeah, definitely. I totally wholeheartedly agree with you. And yes, the way Beast of the East, culture and their system is run, that definitely really plays the entire part as to why, his numbers may not jump out at you, but the skill is there. And now, real quick before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk about a hypothetical situation. As I said, besides Kentucky, he's also interested in Virginia Tech and Georgetown. Now, Georgetown already having JoJo Kearney and now Keith Singleton. I know you might have kind of two point guards there, but could you see a potential Georgetown lineup making sense with a backcourt like that plus JoJo Kearney?
I could, but you got to take into account the players that are already on their roster. You got to take into account that they could likely be recruiting players from outside of SimWorld Prep. They could be recruiting players from overseas. They could be doing this and that, transfers, whoever. And again, who is already on their roster? So when you talk about those kind of things, they got in a big guard commit in Keith Singleton. They got in a big center commit in JoJo Kearney. And they're going to have to kind of weigh those options. Do they want to offer KPJ to come play with them when maybe they've already got their guy to run the floor? And really not just them that has to consider that. That's KPJ that has to consider, do I want to go into a team that has brought in another guard from SimWorld Prep, that has some guys on the roster already who can play that position? Am I going to be happy here, and is it going to be a good fit for me here? But yeah, I mean, I can see it being made to work. Keith Singleton's a great defender. He's not quite the facilitator that KPJ is, so their games could balance each other pretty well. KPJ is not quite the defender that Keith Singleton is, but like I said, better facilitator. So yes, I can see it working. I would be interested to see if both sides are interested in that happening.
But yes, definitely. And like you said, a lot of it comes down to, am I going to be happy, fit wise? And I do think, Singleton's defense and him being more of a scorer than what KPJ is, but KPJ's ability to facilitate and overall, rebound, fill out a stat sheet, you know, in the subcategories, maybe not in the scoring department. I think that could very well balance it out. But like you said, it all comes down to fit and, the guy's happiness.
Absolutely does. You got to go where it's going to work for you.
Absolutely. All right, y'all, that's going to do it for today's episode of the J Rock Show. Siege, thank you for joining me, my brother.
Of course, it was a pleasure anytime.
All right, y'all, this has been the J Rock Show. Thank y'all for tuning in. And as always, see the game, be the game.